is home. We're going to introduce our new series at Sangha Night.
Thanks very much, Vadanya. Thanks for that very generous introduction. So thank you. I'm just trying to get rid of something on my screen, which is very odd. Okay, can't. Oh, never mind. So thanks, Vadanya, and a very warm welcome to everybody, especially, as Vadanya said, if this is your first time at Sangha Night. It seems a bit odd for me to welcome you when you're there and I'm not. I'm here, but never mind, I'm going to do it anyway. Hopefully I'll get to meet you in person soon, I hope. So if this is your first time here on a Tuesday, you've arrived at the beginning of a new theme. Our theme, we're calling it the wheel, the spiral, and the goal. And so we're going to start out by looking at the wheel, the Buddhist wheel of life, the symbolism of the Buddhist wheel of life and what it means. And then we're going to move on to look at what happens when we can get off that wheel and start moving more towards enlightenment. And the goal itself, enlightenment, what does that mean? But tonight I'm going to kick off the series by giving a brief overview of the wheel, what the wheel is about, what it's telling us. And then over the next few weeks, we're going to go into more detail about that wheel before we move on to the spiral and the goal. So first of all, the wheel is a wheel. Wheels are round, they go round and round. And if we're on a wheel, we go round and round. We seem to be getting somewhere, but we always seem to end up back where we started. So this idea that life as it is usually lived as a wheel is not confined to Buddhism. We see the same sort of idea in, there was a sort of medieval symbolism of the wheel of fortune. I remember one version where it's got monkeys going up until there's a monkey with a crown on his head. He's really great at the top, and then these monkeys falling down the other side. So life has its ups and downs, I suppose. That's what it's saying. Life goes round and round in a way. But the Buddhist wheel of life goes into a lot more detail. It represents the ultimate vicious circle. So it represents the way that unless we do something about it, the way we act now is determined by our past, our history, our conditioning, etc. So the way we act now is determined by our past. The way we act now creates our future. So if we're not careful, if we don't do something to break out of that wheel, out of that spiral, our past creates our present creates our future. There's no gaps in that. We just go round and round and round. We're not, we don't have any choices. Our life lives us rather than us living our life, unless we can find a way off the wheel. So that's one way of looking at the wheel. That's what the wheel is. But you could also see it in a sort of slightly more modern analogy as a sort of computer game. A sort of computer game, one of those computer games where you're sort of in a huge, rambling, ramshackle, ancient castle full of tunnels and magnificent halls and dungeons and chambers of all sorts. And you can find your way around from chamber to chamber and do all sorts of quite interesting things in different parts of this old castle. You can play all sorts of games, score all sorts of points, and appear to be really getting somewhere. You might find your way into a magnificent throne room, but eventually you'll always stand on a trapdoor and end up back down in a dungeon. You might think you're scoring loads and loads of points in one of these rooms. You're doing really well at the game, but then you find that these don't count towards anything. Because the whole point of the game, the real point of the game, is to escape the castle, is to get out of the castle, not to do things in the castle. The real game doesn't start until you get outside. Anything you've done in there doesn't matter. So you could say that the wheel of life gives us a map of the castle. It gives us a map of the castle, a map of the community. It's sort of like a user's guide to the computer game. It's a cheat to the computer's game. It provides us with a hidden instruction. It tells us how it works. It gives us a map, and it gives us a hidden instruction about how you can get out of the castle, where you can find the door out of the castle. But I'll say a little bit more about that later, and then later on in the series, we'll say a lot more about that. So the Wheel of Life is a pretty sophisticated symbol, actually. It's got a lot in it. It's going to take us a few weeks to interpret it, but tonight I'll just give you an overview. Could we have the first image up there, Edward, if possible? I think. Anyway, maybe we can't. Oh. So there you go. That's a traditional painting of the wheel. You can see there's an awful lot of it. It's so much detail. It's overwhelming, probably, unless you're very aware of it. So we've got a simplified drawing, which is the next slide. I hope. Well, okay, so there's a very simplified drawing of it. That makes it a bit easier to see. So you'll see that there are two inner circles. There are two sort of inner circles. And around these 6 like orange segments, where there are illustrations in the orange segments. And then around the very edge of the wheel, outside of the orange segments, you've got these rather esoteric symbols on the very outside of the wheel. And each of these bits of the wheel carries an awful lot of meaning. There's a lot to go into. So first of all, let's have a look in a bit more detail at those 2 inner circles. If we can have the next image, please. Whoa, okay. So you'll see that in the inner circle, the very innermost circle, there are 3 animals. A pig, a cock, and a snake, biting each other's tails. And these represent what are often called the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's greed, hatred, and delusion that are powering the wheel, turning the wheel. Greed, hatred, and delusion are what make the whole thing go round. At the root of the whole problem, first of all, is the fact that we don't see things clearly. We're deluded. And because of this delusion, we grasp at all sorts of things that can't actually give us real satisfaction. So we run on a treadmill of craving, always wanting something more, whether it be money, stuff, gadgets, pleasure, approval, status. We always want something more. And because we're always running on this treadmill, we're constantly distracted from our real task of growing spiritually and not trying to get happiness by grasping at what is not going to give us happiness. So that's usually called greed, but that's actually highly simplified and a rather extreme way of talking. What we're always trying to do is fill our dissatisfaction by grasping after things that can't really satisfy us. It's attraction, grasping. So our delusion, from delusion comes greed or grasping. And from delusion also comes hatred or aversion. Because of our delusion, we also run on a treadmill of fear, anxiety, resentment, blame, ill will. When we fear we can't get what we want, or when we're stopped from getting what we want. So our delusion also gives rise to pointless aversion, which is usually called hatred. But that's, again, rather simplified and extreme way of talking about our whole mass of aversion, from anxiety and resentment right through to actual craving. So that's what drives the wheel. That's what drives the wheel. These 3 animals biting each other's tails and running on a treadmill. That is the power. They generate the power to turn the wheel. And I should say, incidentally, that these three animals, they don't represent greed, hatred, and delusion in the way that we probably assume, based on our sort of associations with these animals. We might guess that the pig, obviously, the pig's going to be greed, isn't it? And we might guess that the cock is going to be delusion, sort of strutting around, feeling really satisfied with itself, thinking it's very important. And then we might think that the venomous snake represents hatred. Well, we'd be right about the last one, but in the tradition, the pig represents delusion and the cock represents greed. Maybe if you've ever been around pigs, you'll have noticed that very often their ears flop over their eyes so they can hardly see a thing. They're just totally focused on the bit of ground right in front of them. And so maybe that's why they're delusion. Maybe the cock pushes the other chickens out of the way to get the feed when it comes to feeding time. So that's the very center of the wheel. The pig, the cock, and the snake running on their treadmill. Our delusion, our greed, and our hatred powering the reel around, driving the vicious circles that we go around and around as individuals and as a species on this planet, unless we do something about it. And then moving out from the very innermost part of the wheel, the next circle we see on the left-hand side, moving upwards, if the wheel is turning, as it were, clockwise. A group of happy people moving upwards towards higher states of being, guided in this case by a lama, a spiritual guide at the very top. And on the other side, we see a group of unhappy people being pulled downwards by demons, falling to lower and lower levels, lower states of greater and greater suffering. So, okay, so we can probably get rid of that image now, if you don't mind, Edward. Thank you. So that next circle out is symbolizing the law of karma. The way we can never stay the same. We never stay the same. We're always moving up or down. Either becoming more expansive, moving upwards to higher, more expansive, nobler mental states of being, or else becoming more cramped, more ugly, moving towards more cramped and more ugly mental states, becoming more unhappy. And of course, according to the law of karma, what determines whether we're going up or coming down is how we act, whether we act skillfully or not. So the law of karma points out that the fact that how we act now creates the sort of person we will become in the future. If we act on our positive impulses, our kind impulses, our generous impulses, our honest impulses, these will become stronger and we will become kinder, more generous, more expansive, more open. We'll experience more expansive, positive mental states. We'll be more connected to others, more connected to the world around us. We'll become larger. On the other hand, if we choose to act on our unkind impulses, our stingy impulses, our dishonest impulses, and so on, we'll become more cramped and closed off and cut off from others. We'll experience more and more negative, unhappy mental states. So the law of karma points out that the person we become in the future is determined by how we behave now. And it also points to the fact that the world we'll experience in the future is determined by the sort of person we become. If we make ourselves more positive, open, expansive people, we'll experience a brighter and more beautiful world. If we make ourselves more cramped, ugly, cut off from people, we'll experience the world as a darker, uglier place. We talk quite a lot about this in the introductory course, so you'll be aware of that. And usually people talk about the law of karma in connection with the Buddhist idea of rebirth. So karma is talked about in terms of what happens to us in the next lives, but you don't have to believe in rebirth to see that the law of karma is true. We are always recreating ourselves by the choices we make, and we can make ourselves into brighter people living in a brighter world, or we can make ourselves into darker people living in a darker world, according to the strands of being that we choose to follow and put our energy behind. And Buddhism is very clear that the world we live in is very largely a reflection of our mental states. Two people can live in exactly the same physical space, the same material world, and experience it quite differently. Again, you might remember that we talk about that quite a lot on the introductory course. Got lost in my notes. Yeah, okay. So the way we act now determines the sort of world we live in. We can live in a higher, brighter, more beautiful world, even a heaven world, or we can live in a happy and dark world, even a hell world. And this isn't any sort of reward or punishment or judgment. It's just the inevitable workings of the law of karma. We're either moving up or we're moving down. And the next circle of the wheel of life, if you remember, there's the two inner circles, and then there are sort of some orange segments. And those orange segments describe some of the different sorts of worlds we can create for ourselves. They're what are called the 6 realms, the 6 ways that we might experience the world around us. In traditional Buddhist countries, these are often portrayed as actual places that we will be reborn, quite literally, according to our karma. But we don't necessarily have to see them like that. We don't have to take them literally, because they are really states of mind that people in this world experience, people in our world experience. On any ordinary day in Sheffield, we could meet people who are living in each of these different realms. You see people on a bus, you can look at their expression on their face, the way they are, the way they move, the way they behave, and you can have a very good idea of which of these realms they might be inhabiting at this current time. And each of us will have spent time in several of these realms, or may still spend time in several of these realms. And an important point about these realms is that in each one of them, there is a Buddha. In each one of them, there is a Buddha who offers a way out of that realm to a better place. So what these Buddhas offer in each of these realms, each of these states of being which we're going to inhabit, is really important to us. What they offer gives us an important teaching about what we need when we're in each of those realms. So in the talks that follow, we're going to be going into much more detail about that and how we can use it in our everyday practice. I'll just touch on it today. So let's have a look at these realms one by one, starting with the 3 at the bottom. The 3 at the bottom are traditionally often called the lower states or the lower realms or the unfortunate states. And they are the realm of hell, the realm of the hungry ghosts, and the realm of the animals. Those are the 3 at the bottom. So first of all, at the very bottom, there is the hell realm. I haven't got an illustration of that because I didn't want to upset you. Anyway, this is a realm of extreme suffering, of very negative mental states. The idea of hell is very, very unfashionable, of course, in our culture, but this is a Buddhist hell, and the Buddhist hell is very different from the Christian version. In the Buddhist version, people are not, or beings are not sent to hell as a punishment for disobedience. What we can do, if we're not careful, is create a hell for ourselves by the way we live and act. So the Buddhist hell is not a punishment, it's a warning. It's a warning that if we act in certain ways that cut us off from other people, that cut us off from what's best in us, we can end up living in a very dark place, a very dark world, a painful world. There are places we really don't want to go. There are worlds which are very like hell. They're just suffering. So as I've said, in each of these realms, there's a Buddha. There's a Buddha who offers us what we need to get out to a better place. And in the hell realm, the Buddha offers, it's described as balm. It's something that you rub on to ease the suffering. It's balm, something to soothe the pain. So if we meet someone in the hell realms, if someone we know is in the hell realms, what we mainly need to do is to find ways to soothe their suffering. We need to soothe their suffering so that they can get their heads a bit above the water, if you like, the water that's rushing them along, and begin to make good decisions, begin to get a bit more perspective and make good decisions. Then they might be able to move on. And if we find ourselves in the hell realms, we need to find ways primarily just to soothe our suffering. It's not going to be exalted spiritual practices. We need to find ways to soothe our suffering and not increase it. That is the way we can find our way out. So that's the hell realm. That's a bit about the hell realm, the very bottommost realm of our 6 orange segments, the lowest of the unfortunate states, the place we don't want to go. So the second of the lower realms, the unfortunate states, is the realm of the hungry ghosts or praetors. I wonder if we can have a picture of that. So this is the realm of the hungry ghosts. This is usually shown as a desert landscape, peopled by beings with huge bellies and tiny necks and tiny mouths. So these are beings who are always hungry and thirsty, but can never be satisfied. And what's more, when they do find something to eat or drink, it turns into a sword and stabs them. So they're shown with swords sticking out of their necks and bellies sometimes, or else it turns into fire that burns them, that causes more suffering instead of satisfaction. So perhaps we could have the next picture of a hungry, ooh, that's clever. Next picture of a hungry ghost. So that's a world of endless craving that can never be satisfied. It's the realm of craving for things that can't bring satisfaction, but which actually cause harm and hurt. So it's the realm, quintessentially, it's the realm of the addict, the realm of addictive craving, always wanting more, whether it be food or drink or drugs or sex or stuff, money, whatever. So obviously the most obvious example of living in the realm of the hungry ghosts is the person who's addicted to some harmful drug, who's ruled by craving for something that's actually obviously harming. But probably most of us have got a bit of the hungry ghost in us, because just about all of us go in for at least some what we call neurotic craving. And the hungry ghost realm is the realm of neurotic craving. So neurotic craving is desire for something that cannot satisfy the need we feel. So for example, if our life feels empty and meaningless and we feel unloved, we don't feel good about ourselves, then eating more cakes or burgers or drinking more beer or whatever, or having a car with a number plate that says our ego is huge, none of these are going to help. None of these is going to make our problem go away. In fact, they're just going to make it worse. And just about all of us go in for some sort of neurotic craving, at least some of the time. Neurotic craving is what makes the consumer society go round. It's what's driving the wheel of the consumer society. Whole populations of people wanting more and more all the time, more and more stuff, more and more entertainment, more and more whatever. That can never bring real happiness, but just distract us from a sense that something's missing. So praetors or hungry ghosts have a sense of inner emptiness. That's what their huge stomach is symbolizing. And in our world, we try to fill that when we have it by consuming all sorts of things: drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, junk food, the toys of the consumer society. And I'm afraid there are lots of praetors in our current world. There's even an entire industry devoted to turning beings into hungry ghosts, the advertising industry. But we all have our own little addictions, probably. So just like the beings in the hungry ghost realm, all too often we try to fill any sense of inner emptiness by things that don't work. The things we crave don't satisfy us in any ultimate sense, and in fact they end up harming us rather than helping us. They just cause more pain. So, as with the other realms, in the realm of the hungry ghost, there is a Buddha who offers us what we need to get out of that realm to somewhere better. So could we have the next image, please? And the next one after that, yeah. So in the hungry ghost realm, the Buddha offers food that really satisfies. The food that really satisfies. So here in this image, we see, I guess, six wiser praetors, six of the wiser hungry ghosts, asking the Buddha for the food that really satisfies, which he's got in the bowl he is holding. I'm not going to talk tonight about what the food that really satisfies is, if we're in the realm of the hungry ghosts. We'll go into that more in next week's talk, I think, or certainly in subsequent talks. But that is something you might want to talk about in your group later. What is it that the hungry ghosts need? What is it that we need, if we're in the realm of the hungry ghosts, that really satisfies rather than causing more suffering? So coming up to the last of the three lower states is the realm of the animals. We've got an image of that, which might look pretty idyllic. Okay, it might look a bit like a David Attenborough documentary, a nature documentary with lots of lovely animals in a lovely scenery. But in fact, the animal realm is not so idyllic at all, because the beings in this realm just act on instinctual drives. They're at the mercy of their instincts, and unless they do something to change that, they don't really have any choice. They're just behaving on instinct. And the beings in this realm don't have any sort of foresight. They don't plan ahead. They don't have any sense of a goal they're moving towards, like spiritual growth or enlightenment. They don't have any sense of ethical guidelines that they're trying to live by, taken in the past. They're at the mercy of their instinctual drives, just in the present moment. They can't be in the gap. So we're in the animal realm when we're acting just on our basic animal nature, focused on things like sex, food, comfort, physical well-being, which might seem pleasant enough at the time, but firstly, the creatures in this world have no real chance of getting enlightened unless they get out of it. They get old and they suffer. They get old, they get sick, they face death, and they have developed no spiritual resources to cope with these things. They're just living in a temporary bubble at the mercy of circumstances. And the Buddha in the animal realm offers a book traditionally. It doesn't look much like a book there, but that's what he's traditionally shown as offering. So representing a book representing culture and the ability to think. Beings in the animal realm don't use their intellect. They have no higher culture. They're just operating on moment by moment instinct. What they need to get out of that realm is intellect to think ahead on a wider perspective that higher culture gives us, to be able to think beyond their immediate present and their instinctual drives, beyond the present moment. And that's what the book represents. Buddha is offering intellect, culture, the ability to think. So if we tend to spend a lot of our time in the animal realm, which might be pleasant some of the time, there is a teaching here for us. We need to learn to think beyond the present moment. defer gratification when necessary, plan ahead, remember the past, remember our precepts, remember the commitments we've taken. We need to become more cultured, more refined, find pleasure in things, as it were, at a higher level than food, drink, and sex, physical well-being. That will get us out of the animal realm and into something higher and happier with more freedom. So, having got out of the 3 lower realms, we enter the 3 higher realms. And the first of these might not seem so much higher. It's the realm of the Titans, or Asuras, as they're traditionally called. If we could have the image of that. Very, very briefly, we'll have the image of that. So, not a great image. The Asuras, they're holding swords, they're fighting, and the Buddha in their realm is also holding a sword. That'll probably do for the realm of the Asuras, as far as the image goes. So the Asuras are big and fierce, and their life is a constant struggle for power. So the realm of the Asuras, we can dispense with that slide, I think, now, if you don't mind. Thanks. So the realm of the Asuras is the world of big egos, the world of competition, envy, aggression, and constant struggle to get our own way. There are a lot of Asuras at the top of big organizations because you have to fight to get there. There are a lot of Asuras in politics on both sides, in trade unions, in any situations that are dominated by strong, unself-critical people who like power and thrive on conflict, or people who just like conflict. I mean, the realm of activism may attract quite a lot of Asuras, people who like conflict. Being an Asura is all about winning. So to be a successful Asura, you have to keep on winning. But that's where the whole thing falls apart, really, because it's not possible to keep on winning. Eventually, every Asura loses an election, their firm goes broke, they have to retire, they end up in court, something happens to knock them off their pedestal, they become vulnerable, their pride gets battered, and they fall down into a lower realm, another state of being. And because they've fallen from quite a high state, and because of their big ego, that is very painful when they find themselves in a humble state and don't get much respect, or nobody takes much notice of them. So I'm reminded of this, for those of you who are old enough, of Margaret Thatcher, actually, who's an Asura, if ever there was one. And there's a picture of her when her cabinet turned against her, and she was basically pushed out of the role of Prime Minister. And there's a picture of her in her car, collapsed, tearful. So it was a picture of the downfall of an Asura. It was very sad, actually. So in the realm of the Asura, the Buddha holds a sword, which is the sword of wisdom. For the Asura, the way to move on is through wisdom. There's a connection between wisdom and the aggression of the Asura state. The Asuras have an affinity for wisdom rather than, say, compassion. That's going to be their immediate affinity. They see life as a battle where you cut through, and cutting through untruth, cutting through obscurantism, obscurity, cutting through obstacles. So instead of battling with each other, an Asura can begin to battle with falsehood, irrelevance, unclarity, delusion, in fact, and cut through to the truth. So if we're a bit of an Asura, reflecting on the real nature of things, studying the Dharma, can help us to cut through, to develop this sword of wisdom, to cut through delusion, which might be the way we move on. So then, fairly briefly, because I haven't got much time, the last two of the higher realms. The first is the realm of the gods, or the demigods. And they're often shown as living in gorgeous palaces surrounded by park-like gardens, enjoying all sorts of heavenly pleasures. They're shown as very refined and beautiful. So the God realm is a realm of refined pleasure, a world without suffering, at least while it lasts. So it's a bit like a Christian heaven, but with one important difference: it's not permanent. Eventually, the gods use up the merit, the positive states, the positive good karma that got them into the God realm, and they fall to a lower, coarser level of existence. And, you know, I mean, if we're really lucky, sometimes we can live in the God realm for a while. Yeah, I mean, maybe if we've got really good meditation practice, we can live in the God realm for a while. But a place with lots of refined pleasure, very little suffering. But the catch is that these states don't last. And if we fall out of the God realm, we may well suffer even more because we don't have experience of suffering. And one thing about the God realm is you cannot become enlightened traditionally from the God realm, because to get enlightened, we need a bit of grit in the oyster. We need some suffering. Suffering is some suffering, manageable amounts, are essential, apparently, for becoming enlightenment. So the goal is not to live in the God realm. And the Buddha in the God realm is traditionally shown as playing music. He's got to offer something beautiful. But music symbolizes impermanence. He's telling them this is not going to last. You're going to have to find your way out of the God realm. And the realm is the goal, actually, the best of the realms, which is the human realm, the final realm. So this is the realm that hopefully we live in, that we need to find ways to live in. It's not a realm of intense suffering like the hell realm, nor is it a realm of constant pleasure like the God realm. Because we need challenges to grow. We need a little bit of suffering. We need a little bit of dukkha. Without some suffering, we can't grow. There's the right mixture of pleasure and pain. It's not a realm of intense competition like the Asura realm. In fact, it's a realm of cooperation, ideally. And we need to cooperate, to connect with others, to move towards enlightenment. We're not lost in neurotic craving or negative mental states. We have intellect and foresight and culture. We can remember what we're about. We can remember our precepts, our commitments. We can make plans to move forward. It's the perfect door. So in the human realm, of course, what the Buddha offers is the Dharma. And the Dharma is the key. The Dharma is the key. So I've said that this whole thing, this whole wheel, could be likened to a computer game where we're in this rambling old castle. All sorts of funny things can happen that seem good or bad, but the goal is to get out. The real game doesn't start till we get out. And the Dharma tells us how we get out. The Dharma tells us where the door is that leads out of the castle, the old ramshackle castle. And so that leads us to the edge, the very, very edge of our wheel, where there is these apparently quite enigmatic pictures, a bit like Egyptian hieroglyphs. They're a form of writing, like Egyptian hieroglyphs, and they mean something. And in fact, they contain the instructions. So these around the edge, around the very edge, these, they need interpreting, but the Buddha's offering us the Dharma, and the Dharma tells us how we can interpret these images, how we can interpret these images to tell us where is the door that lets us off the wheel onto the spiral, where is the door that lets us out of the castle computer game to the place where the real game starts. So that's our goal, to get out. Maybe for tonight we could be a bit less ambitious. Maybe we could set ourselves a bit of a target. We'd be looking at what the Buddha's offering in following weeks. But just let's go back to the very hub. The very hub, the whole thing is driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. So one of the things we can do is just slow that wheel down a bit by slowing down, by pacifying our greed, our hatred particularly, and our delusion for that matter. But we could start to live a simpler life, be happier with what we've got, be more generous so that we spread what we've got around, getting away from greed and getting away from hate, particularly the metabhava, getting away from blame, resentment, etc., etc., etc. The conflicts that we're so riven with in our society, getting away from those. And of course, the royal road to doing that is the metabhava. Somebody I once worked with, Vajratara, used to describe doing the metabhava as sticking your hand in the center of the wheel and slowing it down. So maybe that could be our homework for the next week is let's slow that wheel down a bit by a little bit less of a sense of I must have the next thing and a bit more of the sense of metta for others. Thank you.